All right, everyone. So, welcome back to TypeScript for Beginners. And in this video, we're just going to go over the basics of typing. And so, this is a very fundamental concept that a lot of people that are new to TypeScript, if you come from a Java background, this is something you would be familiar with. But if you have only worked in JavaScript, like jQuery, things like Vue.js, then this inbuilt typing is not there by default. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new file and I'm going to call it basics.tss. So this new file is called basics.tsx, right? And this file is just going to do a couple things. So we want to have some typed strings, some typed arrays, some typed objects, interfaces, some records, some booleans, and some null values. Right, so these are all of the basic data structures that you're going to be seeing all the time in TypeScript, and you have to know what these things are and how they work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say, let's create our string first. So let's say we are working at, I don't know, McDonald's, right? So let's just say let restaurant. And here's where we set the type. We want to set this type of restaurant to string. Then we're going to say it equals McDonald's. All right. So we've created a restaurant string and we've assigned it a type of string with this colon mark. This colon mark is where you give your types to your data structures. Let's create another string just for the purposes of this. Let's say let bank also equal a string. And we're going to set this equal to the bank that I go to, which is Wells Fargo. All right. All right. So what do we need to do next? Well, we need to do a typed array. So usually when we are coding in JavaScript, I would do something like this. I would say const array equals something like this, and then I would pass in some values, right? Now this is how we're used to writing arrays in normal JavaScript code. So how do we change this array to be typed? Well, we can do the same thing that we did up there, and we could assign our type of array to a string, right? So this gives us a very interesting error message, and it says type string is not assignable to type string. So we have to actually type our arrays slightly differently. And that's what I'm going to show you now. So we don't want to actually assign the type right there at the beginning of our array, but we can do it a different way. So how do we do it? So what we're going to do now is we're going to say const, let's just rename this to ordered items. And we're going to assign it to an array with a capital A. We're going to say array, and then we're going to use a less than and greater than sign, and we'll assign the type to string. And we can say double cheeseburger, apple pies, and we'll also say fries. Okay. All right, so this is our new array, and we've changed the name of this array to ordered items. We've assigned it an array type of string, and then we're just passing in 3 values. All right, and that's going to make up our ordered items. All right, so pay attention to how we assign a variable name and we set the type before we add any values. That's the common pattern that you're going to notice here. Okay, So let's say um, we were working on a McDonald's project and we were tracking prices. So let's just say let const food prices. And this array is going to be an array of numbers. So we're going to do the same thing that we did there. We're going to say array with a capital A, but this time we're going to pass in number instead of string. And then we're going to create the array and we're going to pass in some strings, right? Even though we know we assigned a number, let's just pass in small fry and let's pass in a number too. And you'll see here that we have an error because it's not expecting there to be a string inside of our array. I have to set that equal. All right, so the error that we're getting here is very helpful because it's letting us know that the values that we applied here should not be any strings. So the error that we have here is type string is not assignable to type number, and that's because we set all the types of the values that we expected in our array to number. So if we change this to a number, it should get rid of that error. Let's change this to 3. Right, and you can see that that error has now gone away. All right, so what else do we need to go over? Let's now focus on objects. So let's create an object called ordered food. And as you can guess, it's just going to be an object with some values of some of the food that we ordered. So let's say first meal, it's going to be equal to a string. And let's say second meal, I'm going to also assign that to a string. And then third meal is going to be a string as well. Okay, so that is what we've set up so far. And what we want to do now is actually create those values. And so we're going to say first meal is equal to a Big Mac. Oops, sorry. Big Mac. Second meal is going to be equal to a cheeseburger. And our third meal is going to be equal to, let's just say, a McChicken. Okay. All right. So what we've done is we've set up a object and we've typed the values of that object to be these particular values, and we've set them equal to these strings after we set the types first. All right. So this is a way to actually set the type of a object, but let's take it a step further because you can see here that we're violating one of the key principles of software development, which is dry or don't repeat yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an interface and we're going to call it interface food, and it's going to be equal to an object. And then we're just going to copy all of these types here, and then we'll just paste them into our interface. And then we don't need this duplicate code anymore. We can get rid of this and get rid of this, get rid of that. And at the beginning of our object, we can set it to a type called food, right? And so go back, we have these 3 strings inside of our interface, and we're assigning the values or the types of our order food object to the types that were established inside of our interface. Okay, so let's see here. What else do we need to do? So yeah, that's just a basic example of how to use interfaces to assign types, and then we just reference them, the types at the beginning of our object. All right. So, uh, yep, we're good. So don't worry about that error message. That's not why we're having an issue. So we've done that. So let's just get rid of that real quick and let's go to our last example, which is going to be a record. So let's just say const food record. Const food record is going to be set to a type of record, right? And you can see here that record takes in two arguments, right? And so in this case, we're going to pass in a number and we're going to pass in a string. All right. And now that we've done that, let's actually create the object after we set the types. So let's create two numbers, 10 and 20, and we'll put a string next to each of those numbers. So we'll say um, cheeseburger, and we'll say, okay. So we have a food record now. And what this does is it allows us to set the types of the values that we expect, right? So if I did something like this, where I wanted to create a new record inside of our food record, we would say, sorry, food record, and we're going to call the index of 30, and we'll set it equal to 2. You'll see that we get a very interesting error message. It says type number is not assignable to type string on line 16. And that's exactly correct because the order that we set it up was we want to assign a type to the first value and then a string to the second value. So all we have to do to get rid of that error message is add another string. So we'll say hamburger, and food record will then update, and then we don't have any serious error messages now. Now, that's pretty much just a basic overview of how to add types to your data structures. In this video, I showed you all the basic types that you need to be able to do. You need to understand how to type strings, arrays, objects. You need to know how to use interfaces to pass around types instead of repeating yourself when you're giving types to objects. And I also showed you records. What I did not show you yet was Boolean and null values. So let's do that and then let's wrap this up. So let's say ordered. We're going to set it to type Boolean. And remember, Boolean is true or false. So we'll say false, right? So if we change this to, let's say, a number like 23, we get an error message right here that says type number is not assignable to type Boolean, right? So that's where typing at compile time allows us to see some of the errors that we're making before we get to the actual runtime. So that's an example of a Boolean. And now let me show you a value of null. So let's say let is empty, set to null, equal null. Okay. And of course it works. Now we change null to like a string and we say fries. It'll say type fries is not assignable to type null. All right. And so let's just change this back to null. And this will show you exactly why TypeScript is important, because notice that we're catching all of these errors at runtime. I'm sorry, not runtime, but at compile time. So runtime is when your server is actually running, and compile time is when your code is actually compiled. So understanding that your code has to be compiled before it can be ran will help you to understand the value of TypeScript. The idea here is to find errors more quickly and before the user sees them. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this basic introduction to TypeScript, and I will see you guys in the next video.